with a
Recording in progress.
communications emphasis.
Yeah, we lived in South County a while. I thought by 3 years. But let's see Morrison's and Stevens County.
Yeah, we were in Steve here in Cyrus.
Yeah, was that Scott County? No. Oh, Scott County is Scott County. Hope County, yeah.
Cyrus. Always.
Yeah,
It's not going to the school.
Did you know Roger Briggs by any chance?
that's
Roger Briggs?
no, but I at the Wadena City Library.
Just there.
He was a teacher at university,
Okay.
and he was a fraternity. Well,
Where did you go to college?
University. St. Paul. St. Paul.
Okay.
St. Paul, 2/3 of our five, mine anyway, about a third. And that's kind of psychology. That's nothing.
Yeah, the university just starting at Morris the year we left
Yeah,
Cyrus. Well, it was what was it before that? It was a
Agricultural college.
agricultural friend of mine at college, but she taught there then. And then she went out to university to get a degree. Well, she ended up getting married then.
All right.
Handsome.
I think Jan is having some little technical issues with the Zoom, so I think we're that's why we're waiting to start a little bit.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I think it's important to be like 5 or 10 minutes ahead, past the start time because
Okay.
people have run into things that they don't expect on
Yeah.
their way here.
really?
Like
That never happens.
What?
Like a train.
That never happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have long trains around here.
Yeah.
Oh, 2 miles.
Yes.
And if they're going slow. Slowly. Sure. 8 years in the moon.
Yeah, it was 8 years from when President Kennedy said,
Oh.
go to the moon until we landed there. That's the,
That's how you got that.
yeah.
That's why we had to quit kidding about it and get serious, huh?
Don't you roll out of yours, you got stuff inside here. It's bookmark.
Yeah.
Everybody from Wadena,
Yeah.
you're on a farm now, right?
Burndale.
Okay,
I'm halfway between Burndale and Wadena.
okay.
On the way to our place.
Well, we'll call it Burndale.
Well, I just missed the border. We just missed the border for the Burndale School District and Wadena School District. Yeah.
Sure, you're in Wadena Township.
No, Leaf River.
Oh,
We haven't started yet, so feel free.
Wadena Township is across the road from me.
I'll go sit with Billy.
I'll go sit with Benny. I haven't seen him forever. I know.
I thought we'd probably be outnumbered.
Because there'll be more sales there. Yeah, honestly, it is.
I wish.
I'll have to get out. Way people in.
Yeah. No, I missed his too. I could have kicked myself because I had that notice about it inside the book and I see it till the article came out in the paper about what a good thing it was. Yeah.
The poster for this is made on the, and I looked there this morning and I wrote it on the calendar too.
Well, good for you.
They wouldn't let me.
I am having some technical difficulties with the Zoom stream. So it is recording, so at least I'll have a recording up, but we'll see if this will go out live. But
Okay.
welcome to the Wadena City Library. It is May, and we have a special guest for BookEnds. It is Nancy Atkinson. Are you a doctor?
No.
Okay. So a science journalist.
Yeah.
And she has covered the space race and the Apollo missions, and she's written this fantastic book, this almost coffee table size with lots of pictures and lots of interviews with thousands of people who worked on the missions to get man to the moon. So she's going to have this presentation for you today as a part of BookEnds. This is the second one that we at the library have been in charge of. So we are happy to do this. We're going to work out the kinks of this technology, and we're going to have these up on YouTube. So it is live over Zoom. Hopefully, I'm gonna keep an eye on this in case people need to be admitted. So a few things to remember: if you have to use the restroom, it is over on right by the copy machine, and you make a left towards the door. Please mute or silence your cell phones during the presentation. This is a state-funded. Oh yeah, you can go ahead over there.
That window was big.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. This program is funded by the state, so the legacy program through Five Wings Arts in this area. So thank you for funding us, Five Wings Arts. And what else do I have to say about this? So just keep in mind that when you talk to your legislators about funding programs like this, bringing authors to rural libraries to meet you and to discuss some really good topics. And there is a survey in the paperwork that I laid down on the chairs. That's the most important. There are only three questions that you need to mark for me, and that will help us continue to have these programs for you. So, ladies and gentlemen, and online, Nancy Atkinson, thank you. You may not need to use that. So you want to test it out to see if everybody can hear you?
Do you think I should use this? Or is it on? Should I use this? Or
Not on?
oh, I think the blue light is on now.
Yeah.
How does that sound? Yeah, I don't have the loudest voice in the world, so maybe I should use it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn it up just a little bit. There's a
Okay. Well, thanks, Dan, for inviting me here, and thank you, everybody, for showing up. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Nancy Atkinson. I've been a space and science journalist for about 25 years, and I've written for mostly online outlets, websites, and also for magazines. And I've also done a few podcasts and some live events and that kind of thing. Some of the places I've written for, primarily I wrote for Universe Today, which is one of the longest running space and astronomy news websites out there. It's been around since 1999. I've been with them since 2004. I also have done a lot of work for the Planetary Society, the National Space Society, and a newer website called Supercluster. But you can find some of my work in New Scientist, space.com, and other places as well. So, and I've also had a chance to write two books. The first book that I wrote is called Incredible Stories from Space. And it talks about the NASA's robotic mission. So these missions don't have any people on board, but they're going to faraway places that people can't go to. Like right now, we can't get Mars or Pluto or Saturn or Jupiter. But what is it like to operate a spacecraft that's millions of miles away and something goes wrong on it? And a lot of times they know how to fix it. So I talked to 35 different scientists and engineers who work on these missions and got kind of the behind the scenes stories of what it's like to work on these missions, like the Hubble Space Telescope, the Mars rovers, the mission that went out to Pluto. I know you want to go to Pluto, right? And then today I'd like to talk to you about the second book that I wrote, which is about the Apollo missions to the moon. So 56 years ago this July, these are the images that people were watching on their television sets. July 20th, 1969, these kind of ghostly images were coming from the moon as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped on the moon for the first time in humanity's history. And it was a big moment. It's estimated that about 600 million people around the world were watching this. That would have been about 1/5 of humanity at the time. So it was really a worldwide event that people were watching. And it was really monumental. Some of you must remember that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any memories that you had of that?
Sitting on the floor like a lot of kids, right in front of the TV, and our parents telling you, "Come on, move back," and in their eyes, you know. But yeah, but I'm just saying is that it's just something that you always remember when I was 10 years old.
Right. Okay, so I was 9 years old, and I definitely remember sitting there and watching it with my family. And it was just such an important moment in my life because always after that, I was just enamored by space exploration. And so that kind of channeled the rest of my life. Not that I did spacey things all the time, but it ended up being my career. And I'm really grateful for that. So after I wrote my first book, about a year and a half later, my publisher said, "We'd like to do a second book with you. Do you have any ideas?" So we tossed a few things around. And I mentioned, well, coming up in 2019 will be the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And he said, "Wait, stop, what? Okay, that's what you're writing about." And at first I was so excited because here was this monumental event in my life that I was going to get to write about and interview people and write in intricate detail about. But then I started doing my research and I realized that there are already hundreds of books about the Apollo program. And there's documentaries and movies. The Apollo program is one of the most well-documented events of the 20th century. So that was a little daunting, of course. But so I knew I had to do something different than all of the previous books, that focused on the astronauts, which who doesn't love astronauts, right? Or on the rockets or the people on mission control. So I went back to what I love to do the most, and that's to talk to people who work behind the scenes and get the inside stories of what it's really like to work on these missions. So one fact that not many people are aware of is that it took the efforts of over 400,000 people to make the Apollo missions to the moon possible. These were people that not only worked at NASA, but at contractor companies around the country, across the world. And so I knew with 400,000 people, there had to be some untold stories out there. The problem, though, was finding these people. So normally, when I'm going to write an article, I'll get in touch with the media office at NASA and say, "Hey, I want to write on this topic. Can you suggest people to talk to, and can you put me in touch with them?" It's kind of a great example
Recording in progress.
of things that everybody had to deal with in the Apollo program. So Norm worked on the thrusters for the Apollo spacecraft, the command and service module. So these aren't the big rockets that launched them into space. They're little tiny rockets that were on the outside of the spacecraft, several different places. And then were kind of like the steering wheels for this spacecraft to get them to precisely where they needed to be in orbit around the moon, and also to get them back home. Well, when Norm started working on this, him and his colleagues, things were going pretty well at first, but they would test these little thrusters, and they started blowing up, and they couldn't figure out why. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that part of your spacecraft blowing up is not a good thing. So they worked for about 2 years figuring out what was going on with these thrusters. At one time, they thought they were going to blow up one of the buildings at Johnson Space Center. Another time, they thought they were going to take out half of Houston because there was some debris that was coming out of these thrusters, and they thought it was getting out into the city. Well, they finally figured it out, and none of these thrusters blew up. they worked perfectly the entire Apollo program. So that was pretty great. But the problem that they had with these thrusters is not unique. There were so many
Disconnected.
sorry. Yep. There were so many problems, hurdles, and challenges that they had to overcome in order to get to the moon. And these thrusters were just an example of that. Oops. So if this was so difficult, why were we trying to get to the moon? Well, the space race, as it came to be called, was part of the Cold War, which was a geopolitical rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union, which basically lasted from about 1947 until the 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. But it was especially contentious during the 50s and the 60s, especially when the technology for rockets that had been developed during World War II started to be more developed. And each country was trying to demonstrate that they were stronger, which country is better, which form of governance is better, democracy or communism. And what better way to show your dominance by launching large rockets out into the unknowns of space. So this space race began, and at first it seemed like every leg of the race, the Soviet Union was coming in first. They launched the first satellite in 1957, Sputnik. They launched the first human into space, Yuri Gagarin. And finally, in May of 1961, we got Alan Shepard into space, the United States did. And that was a huge accomplishment. But he didn't go into orbit like Yuri Gagarin did. His space flight only lasted about 15 minutes. But even after that 15 minutes of spaceflight experience, President Kennedy made a pronouncement to Congress and said, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. That was a pretty big pronouncement because after 15 minutes of spaceflight experience, even though we had been to space, we didn't have hardly any of the technology that we needed to get to the moon. We didn't have a spacecraft that could travel that far and back again and keep people alive. We didn't have the rockets big enough to launch them to the moon. We didn't have all the systems like life support systems, communication systems, and let's have a live TV broadcast from the moon. They didn't know how to do any of that. Well, how did we do it in just 8 years? Those 400,000 people that I talked about, it was as if they just willed it to happen. They were completely dedicated to Kennedy's vision of reaching the moon. And each of them said, if this thing fails, it's not going to be because of me. So they worked incredibly long hours. 60, 70, 80 hours a week was not uncommon. Some of them slept where they worked. It took a toll on their personal lives. A lot of the guys that I talked to said, yeah, if you were married during this time, you weren't married later. It was really tough on the families, just the amount of time that these people were away working. But they got the job done and they were incredibly proud of the work that they did. So I'd like to introduce you to just a few of the people that I got to interview and talk to. I was really proud to talk to some of the very few women engineers during that time in the 60s, of course. Not a lot of women were working outside the home or especially working in scientific or engineering areas. Dottie Lee was one of the very few women engineers at NASA. She helped design the heat shield. So on the bottom of the spacecraft, as it was returning to Earth, it had a special shield to keep it from burning up because it could reach 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit as it came back through Earth's atmosphere. And she helped determine how to do that. Another one of the ladies that I got to interview was Kathy Osgood, also an engineer. And these ladies didn't start out as engineers. They started out, if you're familiar with the movie, oh shoot, I'm blanking on it.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. If you're familiar with the movie Hidden Figures, the ladies that were called computers, they actually did the calculations before computers. And that's what these ladies started out with. But their managers recognized their talents. And NASA was in such need of talented people, talented engineers, that they, a lot of times it didn't matter if they were a man or a woman. If you could do the job, you were hired. So Kathy helped figure out how to do rendezvous. So when we first started flying in space, people thought that rendezvous was almost an impossible thing to do. That's where you have two spacecraft meet up in space. And so flying in space is a little counterintuitive. It's not like you can just step on the gas and floor it and get to meet up with the other spacecraft. It doesn't quite work like that. For one thing, you have to be really diligent about not using too much fuel because you have a limited amount. There's no gas stations in space, and just from going to a different orbit or in Earth or at the moon, you actually have to slow down to get higher. So it's, like I said, counterintuitive. But Kathy helped figure that all out. And for the Apollo program in particular, they were going to have the lunar module that was going down to the moon, and the spacecraft, the command module that was where the astronauts lived while they were on their missions. But they were going to be separated and had to rendezvous and come back together. So that was a big deal. I was also really honored to talk to this guy. He's actually from Minnesota. His name is Earl Kyle, and he was an engineer at Honeywell in Minneapolis. And Honeywell helped develop some of the computers. I don't know if you've seen some of the footage from Apollo where you see the rocket flying and then you see the rocket coming away. I should have had a video of that. But anyway, the computers that were on the rockets were built by Honeywell. And so Earl helped to do that. And he also helped develop some of the ground computers for the spacecraft as well. Earl is one of the very few Black African American engineers that worked during the space program. He was one of the first. He was actually the first African American at South High School to graduate as the valedictorian. And he's a really talented guy. He's got some great stories about his life, and kind of his mom was white and his dad was Black. And so you can imagine growing up in the 1950s, what a difficult childhood he had. But he was incredibly intelligent and really was enamored with the space program, and that he was so thankful that he was able to work during the Apollo program. Jerry Woodville, he's quite a character. Unfortunately, Jerry has since passed away, but I've known him for about 15 years, and he's a one-of-a-kind guy. He helped develop the caution and warning system. So just like you have lights on your car dash that tells you when you're low on oil or anything like that, they have to have a warning system on the spacecraft to tell the astronauts when something is going wrong. Now, the most famous use of the caution and warning system might be Apollo 13, if you're familiar with that movie or the history of that, where the alarm started going off when they had the explosion on the spacecraft. There was also a time during the Apollo 11 mission, the first moon landing, where the caution and warning system was blowing off, just as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were coming down to the moon. The computer started overloading. And nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody, because I'll explain this later, but the astronauts did not know what was going on. And some of the people in mission control didn't know what was going on. They almost were ready to call an abort, but well, we'll discuss later. But anyway, the caution and warning system came in really big in the Apollo 11 mission. So how do you learn to fly in space when you've never been in space before? So I'm sure that you're familiar with simulations, like airplane simulators. Well, they had to figure out how to do this for the space program as well. You know, you've got to figure out, you know, what buttons do you push? What knobs do you have to turn? All those kind of things. So they had to figure out how to train the astronauts by building, first they were very rudimentary plywood mock-ups of a spacecraft. And later they got to be very sophisticated. You can see this is the lunar module simulator. So inside of there is a life-size mock-up of the lunar lander. But all these boxes and everything on the outside are, there were video screens that would show in the windows that they could simulate what the astronauts were going to see as they were landing on the moon. And as I said, it got to be very technical. And all the astronauts said that this was extremely vital. It was the heart and soul of NASA's success of going to the moon. So not only did they train the astronauts, but they also trained the people in mission control. So they would think of every problem that you could think of, and they'd run a simulation. A thruster went out. How are we going to fix it? Or what do we have to do to compensate for not having this thruster? And so they would run scenarios. Sometimes there'd be day-long simulations. There'd be specific simulations for launch. There'd be simulations for landing on the moon. There'd be simulations for docking the two spacecraft. And it was incredibly important to run these simulations because you could figure out all the things that could go wrong. And you'd have it out, on the just at your fingertips how to fix these problems. And so they would run these integrated simulations every day. And they had these are the people in the simulation mission control, and those are the simulators there. And it was just a very important part of the Apollo program. The guys that were in charge of the simulations were called SimSups, or simulation supervisors. And one of the guys that was the best was Dick Coase. And he's from Iowa, and I got to meet up with him and do a program with him at Iowa State. And anyway, so I talked about the computer problems that Apollo 11 had when they were landing. 2 weeks before Apollo 11 launched, Dick decided to run a simulation where they had a computer problem. They had never run a computer problem before because people kept saying, oh, these computers are so robust, we'll never have any problems with them. But Dick said, I'd like to throw in something where the computer doesn't work. So we talked to a few guys and they figured out something that could maybe possibly go wrong, but really remote chance. But Dick said, oh, I want to stick it in there. So they did this. And none of the mission control people had seen a problem with the computer before, so they did not know what to do. So they called an abort to the landing. Well, Dick read in the riot act after that simulation, and so did the flight controllers, because they knew too that there had to be a way to work around this. And so they went through everything and realized and figured out what they would need to do and they realized that the computer was able to reset and continue on with the landing. So imagine if they hadn't run this simulation 2 weeks before Apollo 11 launched. And unfortunately, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins had already left for Florida. So they were down in Florida when this simulation took place. So they didn't know anything about it, but the people in mission control thankfully did. And, when you hear about NASA and spaceflight, you think a lot about mission control and these guys sitting there with their computer monitors and all that. But behind every person in mission control was a team of people helping them to figure out what they should do, what the readings were. So they had all of these different rooms where people were specialists in all the various systems. And they were kind of the backup. So they had headphones where they could talk to each other and help the astronauts if they had any problem. One of the most interesting rooms was called the Mission Evaluation Room. And this was filled with hundreds of engineers, all who specialize in different systems like the thruster systems or the communication systems, that kind of thing. And these guys were, this is kind of the antithesis of mission control. So these guys are sitting on basically church basement tables and chairs, and they had to sit shoulder to shoulder. They didn't have their own fancy monitors. They could listen in, but they couldn't talk to the guys in mission control. And they had to share these monitors up on the screen there. And if they wanted to keep the information just kept scrolling through. And if they wanted to keep any of that, they went and took a Polaroid camera and took a picture of it. And then they would have it. And the room was darkened. So they developed a magnifying glass with a flashlight on it so they could take a look at the Polaroid pictures and be able to see all the little lines of data. So really, really interesting. Okay, so big moment, July 20th, 1969, and we're getting ready to land on the moon for the first time. So I mentioned about the computer problem going on and not being able to, wondering if they're going to be able to land. There was also a few other things going on as well. So when Neil Armstrong got close to the lunar surface, he realized where he was supposed to land was filled with huge boulders that were about the size of cars, and he wasn't going to be able to land there. And he could see off in the distance there was a smoother place to land, but he was going to have to fly over a big crater to get there. And they were getting close to running out of fuel. So I'm going to share with you a video that was taken. There was a little handheld video recorder out the window that Buzz Aldrin had running. And that's the only visual record that we have of the moon landing. It's, because there was nobody else there to film it, right? So we have that. It's kind of grainy and it's sometimes hard to see. But NASA has another spacecraft that's in orbit around the moon, and they have basically mapped the entire moon in high resolution. And for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing, they did a side-by-side comparison of their high resolution images with the video that was taken during the Apollo 11 landing. And so I'm going to share that with you, and you'll be hearing the feed between the astronauts and mission control, and them trying to go through and overcome the computer problems and the issues of them landing farther away than they thought they would, and getting close to running out of fuel.
Between 5,200 feet. Then the first ball is good. Between 2,200 and the Delta landing, over. Vibrator says, go landing, 2,000 feet. One.
Moving on this.
1201. 1201, roger, 1201 alarm. Where go, same time, where go. 2,000 feet. 2003, 47 degrees, Roger. 47 degrees. Right, you're down. 269. 100 feet, still looking very good. 1202, we copy it. 25 degrees. 25 degrees, 760, 723. 700 feet, 21 down, 33 degrees. 100 feet down to 19. 540 feet down to 30, down to 15. For 400 feet down to 9. 6 forward. 150 feet down to 4. 30 split down now.
So you can see it looks pretty rocky in the middle.
They're, quick on, with all velocity. 7 feet down, 3.5. 27 forward. So 1 and a thing out down. Forward. Altitude, 1.
The crater is gonna.
Down. 622. 15 forward. 11 forward, 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down. 6 feet, 6.5 down. 5.5 down. 1 forward. Right. 275 feet. They're looking good down and out. 6 forward.
It's when the lines down. Then I put everything.
6 left.
So it's
3 times.
seconds to fuel it. And
Good enough.
wow,
Forward.
to control the whole highway, even already been there.
3 feet down. Good enough. 6 up from left. 2 feet, 2.5 down. 8 down. 4 forward. 4 forward. 6 into the leg level. 6, 1.5. 30 seconds forward.
37 to fuel that.
Contact light. Hold this down. HVA and a defense. Close the door, both autos, he's gonna put that over right off. Take the arm off. We're 13 is done. We stopping it down, Eagle. Listen, going is here. We're gonna have landed. Roger, playing quality. We stopped you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're losing again. Thanks a lot. Don't think good here. We're gonna be just
Yeah, just a little bit busy. Yeah. So yeah, that got to be pretty exciting. As the guy from Mission Control said, they were turning blue because they were just on the edge of their seats, wondering if they were going to land or not. Anyway, that spacecraft that I mentioned that has taken high resolution pictures of the moon, they were also able to capture evidence that we did actually land on the moon. So here's the lunar module. It's the spacecraft is probably about 100 miles up above the moon. So the fact that we can see these things is pretty remarkable. These are some of the different uh, experiments that they left on the moon, the camera that they used to film, and that kind of thing. So lots of stuff on the moon that we kind of discarded. Some of the other landing sites they've also been able to image. This one I think, or these two are I think are really cool. So See these squiggly lines here? That's the paths where the astronauts walked. It disturbed the lunar surface enough, and it's still like that because there's no weather on the moon, nothing to change what the astronauts did up there. And if you have any conspiracy theorists that you know that say, well, NASA faked those images, that's their spacecraft. Well, this was a spacecraft from India that took even better, more higher resolution images of the. This is the Apollo 12 lunar module, and up there is the Apollo 11. So yes, we did land on the moon. So again, I was really just so honored to be able to interview all these people and share their stories. You know, some of them said to me, you know, besides family and friends, not many people have asked me about what I did during Apollo. And these were people who sometimes made, you know, monumental discoveries or figured out what to do to, you know, to have thrusters not blowing up, or there were some fuel tanks that were also blowing up. There were so many problems that they had to overcome in just those 8 short years to get to the moon. Apollo 9 astronaut Rusty Schwartz wrote the foreword for my book, and he said that the story of Apollo is just how ordinary people came together to accomplish something truly amazing and extraordinary. And really, that's what it was. All of the people that I interviewed were just basic, ordinary, everyday people, but they became heroes because they worked together to accomplish something truly wonderful. So that's all I have for my presentation, but I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody has any questions. I have some books available for sale if you're interested. The moon book is $20 and this one is $10 today, so special sale price. And yeah, happy to answer questions. Yes.
Yeah, early on, why you mentioned the mammoth satellites, but also you kind of mentioned the tiny thrusters. How big were they?
About, well, like this big, you know.
And they
maybe-
moved. They moved.
Yeah. So you had, if you remember, that you had thrusters on the 4 sides of it,
Yeah.
so you could move in any direction. And you had several of those placed around the outside of the spacecraft. So, you know, when you're in space, you don't have much, you know, you don't have to press against an atmosphere or anything. So
No, but you have to have something to push against, don't you?
it's thrusting the spacecraft. It's
Oh, it's the opposite of what we think.
yes,
It's not pushing.
it's not pushing against, it's moving. Yeah.
I can't see how they on that fuel supply. That was scary.
Yes. And just to be clear, so there at the top part of the lunar lander lifted off, and you know, so that they could get back and meet up with the other guy in the spacecraft. That had its own fuel, so they didn't have to worry about running out of fuel to lift off the moon. But to land, they were getting really close to running out.
Well, and then that computer warning was going on all at the same time too.
Yeah, so the
Oh,
computer
goodness.
was overloading, and they thought that it would, you know, just quit working. Instead, it was built so robustly that it would just reset, but it could figure out where it left off and start over again. So
I had honor of meeting a technician that was on the launch pad for most of the Apollo.
okay,
So he worked with the engineers. I believe he was an engineer himself, but he was pretty much with the Saturn rocket
mm-hmm.
and did all the the setting up and testing and like that. But he made a comment to me that the computers that they had today, my Texas Instrument computer calculator has more technology than the computers that they were using in 1969 and 68 and 67.
Yeah, I think what made them so robust is that they were so simple.
Yeah.
They were it's hard to explain how simple they were. They were little metal round circles. And, computer language is ones and zeros. So if the wire went through the little donut, the little metal circle, that was a one. If it went around it, it was a zero. So they had miles and miles of wiring in these computers. And to build them, they employed women who were in the weaving technology, like the weaving industry on the East Coast. And they followed very precise instructions, put the wire through this one, around this one. I mean, it blows my mind, really. It's hard to comprehend the way these were built, but
One of the 400,000.
yes, exactly.
I just looked it up. So because you're talking about computer power, in terms of how powerful your calculator is compared to the system. So the ROM on the Apollo 11 mission, the read-only memory, 36 kilobytes. That's it. So we now deal in gigabytes and terabytes when we talk about computers now, that they only had 56,000 symbols basically. And then the RAM, which is something they needed to use over and over again, was only 2,000 kilobytes. That's the only thing they could have in their active memory at the time. It's just amazing how they were able to do so much with so little back then, that you had the best minds in the country on it.
Yeah, the computers were built out at MIT in Boston, Massachusetts, and I had the chance to go out there and talk to some people and see some of the replicas or hardware that they used out there. It's mind blowing that we made it to the moon with that technology.
How was the mindset of those people under those conditions? I mean, before that, everybody do it, but how did they think and everything?
They were completely committed to it. They thought it was a great idea. They thought they were, they were doing it for their country, to prove that a democracy was a better form of governance than communism. They were just focused, single-minded to get their job done. And you might remember in 1960, 64, 63, or I can't remember exactly which year it was, but there was a fire that killed 3 astronauts.
Yeah.
They were doing a simulation where they were actually on the launch pad, and they had 100% pure oxygen in the spacecraft, and a spark went off inside the spacecraft and it incinerated in minutes, and the astronauts couldn't get out. And that was a huge blow to everyone. They all said was something that I did, was this a problem that I could have not, could have overcome. But so that was a big setback, but I think they came back stronger because they realized how fragile, like, how careful they had to be. I think they, after NASA started having a lot of successes with their launches and their missions to orbit the Earth, they got a little careless maybe of, oh, we can do anything. We don't have to guard against potential problems. So that was a big reset for everybody at NASA, that they had to kind of think again about making safety the priority, not meeting, the goal of getting to the moon by 1970. So, but with their focus, they were able to do both. So, well, thank you so much for coming out. It was great to meet all of you. And thanks again, Dan, for inviting me here.
Well, thank you for coming around for Nancy Atkinson. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll be available to sign books and sell them, because Daryl had to go, but he would like a signed book, and I'd also like a couple copies for myself. So thank you very much for coming. So we'll stop the feed right here and in the editing room, we'll try to fix some of the technical difficulties. So bye for now on there, but